How complaining affects the brain and general health. While we may think it feels good to vent, complaining has some bad effects associated with it. First of all, what aspects of life make people want to complain? In the aftermath of the recent presidential election, many people are grumbling, regardless of their political persuasion. Cold temperatures due to winter's ice and snow also rank highly on the list of things that displease people. Yet these are only the beginning. Many of us have fallen into the habit of making complaints about everything, from bad hair days to troubling relationships. Even when life is going well, we often overlook the positives and fuss about one thorn among the roses. Why isn't complaining beneficial? Research shows that it rewires our brain for negativity. The brain is designed to work efficiently, meaning that when we repeat a thought, negative or positive, the nerve cells form a bridge between each other to expedite the passage of information. Consequently, the next time we have a similar thought, it is more easily transmitted. This mechanism explains why certain thought patterns quickly become ingrained habits. Yet the detrimental effects don't stop there. A study from Stanford University shows that complaining causes the hippocampus, which plays a vital role in problem solving and other cognitive functions, to shrink. In addition to causing brain damage, complaining also releases a stress hormone, cortisol, the fight or flight chemical the body produces when we encounter some danger, a response that is essential for survival. However, constantly having a high level of cortisol results in high blood pressure, high blood sugar, and impaired immunity, effects that may eventually cause obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. The ill effects of our complaining aren't just limited to ourselves, though. They also involve those around us. People tend to mirror the moods of those around them, so we should be cautious about constantly complaining when we're around our friends. The best way to deal with constant negativity is to develop a sense of gratitude. Just like complaining acts as a poison, gratitude acts as a medicine. Research shows that having gratitude lowers cortisol levels by 23%, as well as reduces blood pressure and cholesterol. It also decreases fatigue and depression. Gratitude is the perfect antidote for complaining, a behavior that steals our brain power, happiness, and physical well-being.
Complacency is the enemy of best. All the people I know who are on the road to becoming the best versions of themselves in life, they wake daily and live with a laser focus on getting better. They are never satisfied. They take nothing for granted. They are never complacent. If complacency is the enemy of best, then complaining is the arch enemy of best. All the people I know who are on the road to becoming the best versions of themselves in life, they rarely, if ever, complain. And it's not because they don't have anything to complain about. They simply choose to be grateful for all in life that is good. And then they invest all of their energy on getting better. All of us assembled here today, we all want to become our personal and professional best, which is exactly the reason why we built the Personal and Professional Best program. We wanted to inspire our Supreme Associates. We wanted to encourage every single one of them. We wanted to educate them. We wanted to offer every one of them a roadmap with a single inspiration to help them write their best life story. I'm Pat Flood, and I welcome all of our Supreme Associates, friends and family who are on this journey with us, and I also welcome the hundreds of real estate partners that are a part of the Supreme family to our Personal and Professional Best program. Our program is simple. It works just like your navigation system. You establish your specific goals in writing, where you want to go. You create a plan, a roadmap to get there. And then you start living intentionally, driving to your destination, and you connect with others in life who want to do the same. They want to be the best. And finally, you adopt a voice, a coach of accountability who acts as a reminder of the pledge that you made to yourself to be your best. We hope to be that voice in your life. Our program identifies the 6 areas in life that we all share in common: family and relationships, health and fitness, personal finance, fun and recreation, faith and community service, and today's area of focus, business. Your business and our business, the housing business. If you've been following the news recently about our business, it's likely that you've heard or read that the housing market is transitioning from what most experts describe as one of the best housing markets ever from 2012 to 2017 to a different market. Interest rates are rising and housing prices are rising as well. In combination, this is making housing a little less affordable than it has been for the previous 5 years. While interest rate increases and price increases are newsworthy, the most telling news that confirms we're in a housing transition relates to housing sales themselves. In fact, housing sales have declined for the past 7 months in a row. The declines have been minimal, but the news certainly suggests that we are indeed transitioning. The question is, what's next for housing? With these new market conditions in mind, and with an interest to educate you, our valued partners, so that you can plan and prepare to be your professional best in 2019, we thought it would be a great time to invite back an old friend and one of the most informed voices in our nation on the topic of housing. That's Doug Duncan, the chief economist with Fannie Mae. Doug will offer his expert point of view on what is going on today in housing, and will share also his forecast for what's next in 2019. Before we chat with Doug about his forecast for what's next, we thought we would look back at the last 50 years of housing sales with an interest to identify the key economic drivers that impact the housing market. I believe this will help all of us to better understand the news we hear about our business. And most important, I believe it will help to educate all of us so that we can become the best service professionals in our business. Let's take a look at 50 years of housing history and the fundamentals that drive our marketplace. The first fundamental is population growth. In 1970, the population in the United States was 205 million people. Today, 340 million people. And you can see on the graph that it's been a steady growth around 2% a year that's taken place over the last 50 years. That 2% growth is very consistent, and it creates a consistent need then for new roofs. Simply said, the number of roofs needed is based on the number of people in the United States, and the number of new roofs is based on the population growth. Population growth drives housing, and it does. It is better to live in the South. As no one finishes their career in Fort Lauderdale, Orlando, Tampa, Atlanta, and Charlotte, and then moves to either Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, or Buffalo. No, they move from there to our place here in the South, which means the population growth in the U.S. is around 2%, but the population is growing faster in markets like ours in the South. That's a good thing. Let's talk now about U.S. home ownership rates. Now that we've identified that population growth is a key fundamental for housing growth, let's take a look at the history of 50 years of people owning versus renting a roof. The average home ownership rate over the last 50 years is just over 65%. The high, it was 69% in 2005. That was just before the crash. That was a time when we were, by historical records, over-owned. Essentially, credit was liberalized in housing like never before. Download the movie The Big Short if you'd like some additional detail. Today, home ownership is just under the historical average of 65%. Now let's take a look at housing sales. Another 50-year history we're sharing here with you. The first point is there are a total of 11 years, only 11 out of approximately 50 years when housing sales went down year over year. Again, housing is in part driven by population growth. So if you look at 2006, that was a time when we were growing faster than ever before in history, driven again by liberal credit. As our history is usually very stable in housing, historically, that best period, too good, was followed by, you guessed it, the worst period in history. We stabilized, and then in 2012, we saw a recovery which has lasted for the last 6 years. Growth. It's been very good, one of the better housing markets in history. Now let's take a look at what I believe is one of the most important fundamentals that impacts our business, and that's employment, or as it's reported in the news, unemployment. The average unemployment rate over the last 50 years in America is 6.3%. The highest rate of unemployment came at the height of the financial meltdown, and it topped out at just under 10%. Today's rate, 3.9%. It's the lowest rate in the last 50 years. If employment matters to housing, and it does, as the data tells us, that confidence in employment is fundamental for consumers to take on debt. Well, if it matters, and it does, we're in good shape heading into 2019 related to employment. Let's discuss interest rates. They've been in the news a lot lately. The news is that they are going higher. And while that is true, it's also true that they are low by historical standards. The 50-year average fixed rate is 8.1%. In fact, we are still today just under 5% at generational lows on interest rates. Finally, let's talk home appreciation rates. Values have been going up. In fact, over the last few years, they've gone up a little bit faster than historical averages. So in combination, interest rate increases, albeit still at generational lows, combined with home price increases, well, it's having some effect on affordability. How much of effect on affordability? And is that partly what's causing a bit of the slowdown that we're experiencing? We're going to let Doug Duncan, the chief economist with Fannie Mae, answer that question. So Doug, welcome to Personal and Professional Best.
Thanks. Appreciate your inviting me. Looking forward to it.
Again, we're grateful to have you today. So I want to start out by just, we have an audience of just around 1,000 realtors and a number of mortgage bankers with us as well. As an economist, when you think about kind of a macro perspective, macroeconomic perspective, what are the 2 or 3 most important economic data points that you follow that help indicate whether or not we're moving positive in housing or whether or not we're moving in a negative direction in housing? So what are those data points, those 2 or 3 that you really track?
Sure. Well, first of all, the housing story is really one of demographics and population, and I know that you have shared some information on that. One of the things that we know is that if someone is going to buy a house by using a mortgage, it's a really good thing if they have a job and if that job has an income. So one of the very first things we always pay attention to, and on the first Friday of every month when the Labor Department releases the current month's employment data, we're there to assess what does that mean, and we don't release our monthly forecast update until we have seen that data and incorporated it. So that's the first thing is how many people there are, but then with the people, how many are employed and what's happening to their income. So I put employment and income together as one variable. I'll add a bonus here. If you think within that macroeconomic environment, what do we watch from a housing perspective? We actually do a survey of 1,000 households a month focused on how they put housing into the context of their economic well-being. And we release an indicator called the Home Purchase Sentiment Index, because what we think is really what drives the housing market is the sale and purchase of a home as opposed to its refinancing. And in the last 2 months, that indicator has suggested a flattening. It's a kind of a 12-month look out. It's suggesting that the momentum has moved from upward, which is where it's been since really 2012, to plateau. And I'll talk a little bit more about that after a bit. The second thing is related to that, which is we have observed that within market, in most markets, the higher priced group of homes, if you divide it into high, medium, and low priced within that market, the high price has clearly slowed in many markets. And so we interpret that as a fact that the policies put in place post-crisis had a greater benefit for higher income households, particularly those that had a portfolio to manage, and they have pre-positioned themselves for this period when the Fed would end its interest rate easing and start to push rates up. And then the other thing that I would say in the housing sector that ties out to the macroeconomy is simply the lack of entry-level supply, and that's been the driver of price appreciation. And that segment of the market may slow simply because some of the younger households who might be in that entry-level area are seeing the very strong pace of price appreciation paired with rises in interest rates and are saying, well, wait a minute, is this the same picture that we saw before? Should we maybe be a little more cautious today? So those are some of the things we're thinking about as indicators in the macroeconomy and related housing components.
Let me ask you a question. So if 2007, 2011, that period of time was arguably one of the worst 5 years in housing, certainly post, if you will, the liberal credit financing period. And if, in fact, then the recovery from 2012 to 2000, maybe through 17 and even into 18, if that was arguably one of the best periods in housing, as you think about this quarter, the fourth quarter, and you think about 2019, what's your housing sales forecast? And if you were going to characterize the worst marketplace those previous 5 years, arguably one of the best marketplaces, how would you characterize kind of the go forward from this point?
Well, there's no question that the 2007 to 11 were very bad years. We essentially destroyed 3/4 of the production process to build new houses, and stayed at that very low level. We went from about 2.2 million units being built down to about 600,000, and we stayed there for about 3.5 years. We're still recovering from that. The period of 2012 to 17 were good years, increasingly good years. 2018, as noted, a little bit of a downturn in sales, not a huge downturn, but clearly a downturn in sales, maybe a 1% to 2% below 2017. Our current forecast suggests 2019 will be up roughly the amount that 2018 was down. So the 2-year time period, pretty flat. And then we think after that we're going to see a slowdown. Our growth forecast for 2020 is only around 1% growth. So a little over 1% growth. That's pretty close to recessionary territory.
Got it. So we'll have you back then hopefully sometime in the fourth quarter of 2019 so you could talk to us a little bit about what's happening in 2020. It sounds like next year, similar to this one, maybe a little bit better. Doug, over the last 5 years, if you've been a seller, you've been able to put your product on the market, your house on the market, and in many cases, depending upon markets, but in a number of markets, you've been able to get multiple offers and in some cases past the list price that you actually wanted for the home. What do you think are in terms of expectations for price increases in 2019?
Well, these are national numbers, and of course the local markets vary significantly. So you
Sure.
want to again reflect on what's going on in your local market. But Based off that same survey I was referring to earlier, we think that 2017 was the peak in the rate of price appreciation. So that doesn't mean prices are going to fall. It means they're not going to rise as fast. So, and that could be a good thing. If you're in an affordability constrained market, and you're on the buy side, you would like to see some slowing in the pace of price appreciation, particularly with the rise in interest rates, because when both prices and interest rates are going up, that is an affordability question. Yep. So we would expect prices will still go up in 2019, but slower, and the same thing in 2020, particularly in segments. I've been talking to folks in markets where there have been very strong price appreciation in the high-end price points, and some of them have said that they're now seeing relistings coming in at significantly lower asking prices than what they were originally listed at. So that goes back to what I was saying earlier about the extension of the time on market for the higher price tier in any given market.
So we're just going to normalize what we have had as kind of excessive, if you will, not substantially excessive, but exceeding what norms have been on price increases. We're just going to wind up normalizing and seeing less increases going forward.
Yeah, if you strip out inflation and look from the end of World War II out to today, the inflation-adjusted average national rate of price appreciation is about 0.75%. If with inflation, it's about 4%. So we've been well over that for 4 years now. We've been, in terms of real terms, we've been in the 3 to 5% range. That's well above that long-term average. So you should expect that there's going to be a reset to something closer to that long-term average.
Yeah, particularly if interest rates, the other part of affordability, continue to increase. One would imagine that demand in the marketplace will require sellers to be probably a little bit more liberal with pricing.
Well, I was going to say the one thing to bear in mind as a safety factor, though, is that we're building probably 250 to 300,000 too few units of single-family and apartments. So there's a downside cushion in that demand is pretty strong, and we're still short of supply. So that would suggest it would be difficult for prices to fall nationally.
So if you're counseling one of your children right now, and I know how you feel about family, very similar to me, and they were in 2019 going to sell their home with recent history in mind, because there has been, just from a seller standpoint, there's been somewhat of an expectation that you put it on the market and you're going to get multiple offers. You put it on the market, you're probably going to you might get more than you actually asked for. So, we just talked about appreciation, but slowing some. But if you were talking to one of your children who was going to sell their house and giving them expert advice so that they could, let's just say, have the appropriate expectations, tell us how that conversation goes.
Sure. It always starts with the same thing, and that is, do you have a household budget? It's the building block for making good financial decisions. So you need to know where your money comes from and where your money goes to, and how much of it is available for discretion versus saving versus your faith or charitable giving. And so that's the first thing. And then the next thing is treat whatever housing you're going to that you're selling or that you're going into as a consumption good. It is true that some people make money, I put quotes around that, on their house as an investment, but typically that's more a function of what's going on in economic growth in the market that you're in than it is about the house itself, because there are lots of folks where what they have is a house that that does not appreciate in value because the economy doesn't grow in that area. And to your point, I have a son who owns a house and he's thinking about selling the house. So those are some things that we've actually been talking through. He has two young kids, which of course are grandkids of mine, so I care about them too. And they're now 8 and 9, going into the teen years. They'd like a little more room. And so we're talking through, okay, you have a 4% fixed rate mortgage on that house. Are you going to be giving up a 4% fixed rate mortgage and taking 4.75%? And the equity that you have, is that all going to go into the additional larger house? It's a balance between wants and needs. And how do you balance those things?
If your son does decide to ultimately go through on selling and buying, I know a very, very good mortgage company that delivers the industry's best experience, Supreme Lending, that would be more than happy to help them. And then what we'll do is sell that loan to Fannie Mae.
Exactly. The family full circle.
Yeah, we'll keep it all in the family. In terms of, let's flip the conversation then. So you have a son, and you do, and he's going to be going potentially out to buy. So if a lot of realtors here today, and consumers obviously know that prices have gone up some, they know that rates are gone up some. Make the case, if you will, for why it's a good time if you're on the buyer side to buy, notwithstanding the fact that, to your point, and I'm glad that you made it, that people need to have a budget. But if someone is reasonably, done a good job managing their finances, make the case on why it's still a good time to buy, Doug.
Sure. And I do this frequently. Some people who hear me speak on radio or TV or something will actually find my number and call me and ask, should I buy today? Should I lock in an interest rate today? My answer is always the same. Of course, I first say, do you have a family budget? That's my number one. But second, I say, if that budget at today's interest rate and the price of the house you are considering fits that budget, then buy. If you put that off because you are thinking that rates might fall or prices might fall, now you're a speculator. And can you afford to be a speculator? Some households can afford to be a speculator, and that's fine. They should just know that they've gone from a home buyer to being a speculator and understand what that implies. And what the other thing that's embedded in that piece of advice is treat the housing as a consumption good, not as an investment. So make that decision, and then when you've gone through that set of mental steps, now if you're in a position from a household financial perspective to consider an investment component to buying that house, just be aware house prices do fall, they also rise. And think about where we are in the cycle. We're late cycle, no question. We've seen strong price appreciation for a significant period of time. That's likely to slow. So if in your planning horizon, say you plan to only own this house for 7 years, if the expansion goes another couple of years and we see another couple of years of strong house price appreciation, you're getting closer to that period where you're not going to see much appreciation. And so if you factored that in, or you do want to factor that in to your thinking, your plan as well. Because hopefully your budget isn't just today's numbers, but it's also a plan of where you want to go. So those are some of the things that I would think about and actually talk about with my own kids.
Awesome. Well, listen, Doug, I can't tell you how much we appreciate you taking the time to share your wisdom on the housing industry with us today. I know there's an awful lot of people in the audience that are richer and are going to get richer as a result of the information that you've given them today as professionals, and that's what this program, Personal Professional Best, is all about, giving people wisdom so that they can go on and become better at whatever it is. In this case, it's in their business life and in the housing industry. So thank you so much, and I continue to wish you good luck and blessings to you and your family. And we'll look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Thank you, and the same wishes and blessings to you. And thanks for inviting me to join, and we'll talk to you again in the future.
Yesterday, today, and tomorrow, a housing conversation with Doug Duncan. I hope the time we invested today, looking back at 50 years of housing data and getting a perspective on today and tomorrow in housing from Doug, offered value to you as you pursue your professional best. I think the key takeaway was that after 5 years of housing sales increasing, the market has plateaued. These new conditions will challenge all of us in the housing business as we head into 2019 and beyond. With these new conditions and with this new challenge and with an interest to offer you encouragement in keeping with the spirit of our program, we solicited voices of leadership from the real estate industry to offer you their best advice to ensure you perform at your professional best in 2019. We talked with Alan Waxman, an operating partner with Keller Williams in South Florida. Alan shared that 90% of all success is your mindset. He said, get real, get right. First mindset, then action. We talked with Gene Whidden, owner-operator of Better Homes and Gardens in South Florida. Gene's advice? Smart agents work and prospect within the sweet spot of the market, the price range that is selling. Doug confirmed Gene's view as Doug shared what Gene shared. The upper end of the market is not the sweet spot today. We heard from Ryan Graham of the Graham Seavey Group here in Atlanta. They are one of the top real estate producing groups in the Southeast. Ryan confirmed that competition is indeed at an all-time high. His advice? Lean in to your sphere of influence. Upgrade your script training. Understand and communicate your value proposition. We heard from Kathy Griffin with Century 21 in the Carolinas. Kathy said, keep it simple. Send 5 cards per week, thank you cards, and don't ask for business, simply include your business card. And I love this. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. We heard from Deb Nardi, a team leader here in Atlanta. Deb said, be intentional with your time management. Sharpen and increase your outreach. Make additional phone calls. Increase group events. And invest in digital marketing. And finally, we heard from Rick Hale, an operating partner here in Atlanta. Rick said, elevate your intentionality around your database. Maximize your lead generation. He also said, firm up your credit score and save money because being in a good spot financially gives you flexibility as the market transitions. He also encouraged you to find an accountability partner and a coach so that you will accomplish your goals. We agree, Rick, and we hope many of you will continue to utilize this program as a resource to help you become your personal and your professional best. Okay, that is advice from voices of leadership in the real estate business about what you should do. Earlier, I gave you my advice when the program began about what you shouldn't do, and that is be complacent or complain. When we assemble for our PNPB program, we hope to accomplish 4 things. 1, we hope to learn how to become our best. Today was about being your best in business. 2, we want to compete because competing makes us better. The competition, it's about to begin. Number 3, we want to have fun, and we're about to do that. And number 4, we want to make the world a better place, and we're about to do that as well. It's time to play smart, the supreme mortgage and real estate trivia game. Since we invited back our old friend, Doug Duncan from Fannie Mae, we thought it only appropriate to invite back another old friend and your favorite host. That is Frederick McDonald, also known as Freddie Mac. Let's get ready to play.